Welcome to This Club Sucks, grief support for parents after the lasagnas are long gone. I am your host, Melissa Monroe, here with my co-host, Alexandria Seamock. Each week we record our child loss chat on Twitter Spaces, where we explore topics around grief and trauma. Whether you are a bereaved parent, want to support bereaved parents, or exploring other sources of grief, we'll be here holding space after the lasagnas are long gone. Oh, this club sucks. Well, welcome everyone. This is Child Loss Chat on Twitter Spaces, and I record all of these spaces for my upcoming podcast, This Club Sucks, support for grief parents after the lasagnas are long gone. Today, my co-host Alexandria and I are welcoming Dr. Donna Jennings as we explore the topic of sexuality around grief. We're going to start with an interview with Dr. J, and then we're going to move on to a Q&A. If there are some questions you're maybe shy to ask or you don't prefer to be recorded, you can DM myself or Dr. A your question, and we will cover it anonymously. Dr. A is honestly probably safer because I'm, like I mentioned, not so techie. And sometimes it's hard to host and check your DMs. But try either one of us if you're not connected to Dr. A, and I will do my best to multitask. Although, as Dr. J knows from my typo earlier, it's not going that well for me today, the multitasking. But you never know. I might rise to this occasion. Whether you're a bereaved parent or bereaved in general, or just interested in becoming acquainted with the idea of accepting your own mortality, this show explores all kinds of topics around death and grief, particularly for bereaved parents, so that we can live full lives despite the things that have happened to us. So Dr. J is a remarkable woman. She is the host of the Sexuality Space at 12 Eastern Time on Twitter Spaces here. I believe she also does Teachable Moments on wisdom.com. She has a master's in public health and a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in sexuality-focused areas. She is an author of many books, both fiction and nonfiction, and an educator, and helps writers write sex scenes and all. She's a very busy woman, and I'm so honored to have her. Dr. J, did you have any opening thoughts about this topic?
Well, Melissa, I think for you and me, we look at this topic and we go grief and we go sex, and it's two topics that most people don't talk about in general, don't get a lot of information or training in how to handle it or cope when either of these things come up. But when they're slammed together, it's even more difficult.
Oh, absolutely. And we know that the amygdala in the brain, which is in the limbic system part of the brain, the more emotional part of the brain, is active in both sex and grief. It's sex and death center. And I don't know which area our culture is less comfortable discussing sex. It's probably death, because we'll discuss sex on like in a shallow way, at least. But that is not our focus today, obviously. But because most people don't think of amygdala talk as sexy. I mean, I know how to turn off a room as soon as I bring up the amygdala.
So bring up that brain science every time; it'll stop them in their tracks.
That's my MO, Dr. J. I mean, how bad do you want this? I'm going to talk about the amygdala. Are you still in? It's an excellent screening process. So we know that the amygdala is involved in sex, grief, and PTSD. We know that in PTSD, the amygdala and the hippocampus can both lose volume. We know that in sex, that sex responses can be increased, can be higher in people that have larger volumes. However, it is not the case that everyone in grief has a decreased sexual drive. Responses seem to vary widely between increased interest, decreased interests. I know many people that have switched teams entirely, which is, good for them. But do you have any thoughts on this, Dr. J? I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the various ways that a traumatic event or a traumatic loss, or even just a loss in general, can affect our sexual being.
It is so complex, detailed, and nuanced. It's almost like setting up an entire teaching direction to talk about the complexities. I want to start by giving an example of something that's fresh in my life right now. One of my writing friends lost her husband 3 months ago. And this is someone who's totally integrated into sexuality. And we had a project that we've been working on together, and that immediately got put on hold as she's dealing with children. And this was a tragic situation, and she has a lot of things going on. And I sent her a message, and I said, and I've been sending her messages every day. I just sent flowers. I just sent different things. No, I'm thinking about you, as a touchstone for her. And when I said, I'd like to talk with you, is there a good time? She said, yes, let's talk now. And I went, okay, great. And we started our conversation, and she said some things that she needed to say. And then I said, well, I have a question to ask you. And she said, what's that? And I said, how is it that you're going to be able to continue your work in sexuality knowing that your partner was so involved in every single project you did, but the one she and I had? And she had this dead silence on the phone, and she said, you are the only person who has recognized that I'm going to have a hesitation about moving forward with work, because every time I pick up any piece of work that relates to sexuality, it's tied directly back to us as a couple and the work that we did. And so the complexity part of grieving in sexuality is so dependent upon the person, the people that they are in relationship with, the people that are around them. You think about the idea of, what do people know about your sex life anyway? How is somebody going to be supportive where you might need to have some specific conversation about what's going on for you, but yet nobody knows what's going on for you because you haven't shared anything about your sexual life with you? And when we have in life stages, when we have death that occurs through accidents or tragedy and not within the lifespan of what passing away at the end of life has to do with, the wallop of that or the stress of that is so varied per person. And one of the things that I always look at is, what has the stressors for this individual's life been before this death occurred? Because we know that we can have pile up of stressors, and when the pile up happens, maybe the wallop of this giant grieving emotion that one has to deal with is going to be more intense than anyone ever imagined. So let me pause there and see what you have to say about that.
Oh, that's so true about the pile up, because regardless of your relationship to the person that you lost, obviously sexuality is going to come more into play with a spouse or a lover, or in my case, parents. When it's a child, it becomes a really one partner might really seek the comfort of intimacy and sexuality. One might completely shut down. They still have a lot of them still have other children to parent. Some lose their only child, and that, which is a product of their sexuality. And so there's no way that doesn't become just a minefield, because anyone we lose has touched our lives in so many different ways. And so there are therefore so many reminders. So that's an excellent point. And we all grieve differently. We know that. We even individually don't grieve each death the same way. We don't even grieve the death of our parents the same way, or friends the same way. And so expecting two people in a relationship to grieve the loss of, someone they loved in common, like a child or a friend or a relative, expecting them to be at the same place at the same time in a grieving process is just really not fair.
And I was going to say, Melissa, too, what you're addressing is that the one thing that is similar to grief and to sexuality is that we are so individualistic in our expression of what those two components have to do with, while grieving is that energy, fuel, and emotion, that we're trying to get information from, and, passing through our bodies and our minds, and working the process of it. Sexuality's got that component too, and we really have to stop and take a look at the messages that we've been given up to this point to either help us cope, to help us create how sexuality can be a part of the grieving. And I think when you're looking at losing a child, I think one of the things that's even more difficult with the two parents being in different places is, how do you get back to a place where you can be together? And I always start with, what is the meaning of sex? And when most people go, oh, it's intercourse, then you've missed a whole range of things that would be little steps along the way to help you get back to that place with your partner.
I knew I liked you. That's so, that is so true. It's so true. And it's just such a minefield for so many people. And now I have this great, simple question that I can ask people when they talk to me about it, on the down low, because most people ask these kind of questions privately. What is the meaning of sex to you, and what is the meaning of sex to you?
Right.
So simple. The greatest solutions are always simple, aren't they?
Well, it's simple in that direction, but, I take apart, like you do, the scientific information. So, there's some theoretical things that we want to take a look at. Sexuality is an umbrella. Sex is a part of sexuality, but we can utilize so many things about sexuality, but we don't talk about that. Where you said at least we talk about sex superficially, I'm going to say it's even barely scratching the surface. So it's almost that opportunity for people to step into a brand new relationship if they have the strength, if they have the support, if they could see that sexuality could be the communication aspect together. But, sometimes I think people are nervous about getting the support that they need, whether that's, through the church, whether that's through a therapist, that direction. It makes it more difficult.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in our culture, really, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that kind of mentality really makes it difficult for people to reach out. Michelle has a question. Hello, lovely Michelle.
Hiya, yeah. It's not really a question as such. It's just I wanted to share a little bit about my experience of how these two, intertwine, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I was quite, I'd say I was quite hypersexual, to be honest, and I never really felt about any connection, I just used to be very just casual sex person, but as I've come to terms with what happened to me and, grief, I've kind of changed now as a person. Like, I really, being sexual with somebody for me is so emotional. I can't do it. I just can't just have one night stands or be like that. It has to have a really deep connection, and that's how I have changed, because it's completely changed me as a person, going through all that. And it really does. It really is a journey. And I always say, like, sexuality is such a fluid thing. It changes. You know, like I'm a completely different person to how I was maybe 3 years ago. So it really is a journey.
It absolutely, thank you for that share. And yes, it absolutely is a journey. And it sounds like yours is going in a positive direction. What do you have to say, Dr. J?
Yes, every time anything happens in our life, it doesn't matter what the topic is, it gives us the opportunity to make different choices, to get further exploration, to know more about who we are. And one of the things that, just in general in sexuality, I'm always asking people to hit the pause button, assess, reassess, think this through. I look at the holistic nature of sexuality. So, what's the physical, what's the emotional, what's the mental, and what's the spiritual? So, when we take a look at something like grieving, we know that grieving is going to hit all four of those areas. And based on how it hits us in those particular areas is how we're either going to have the action to bring it forward, or we're not going to feel like we can do anything. We don't have any energy behind that, which is why that we see some people grieving are, I have lots of energy, I want to have sex, I want to do, whatever that's going to make me feel better. Or some people have no desire and energy whatsoever. So then you're sitting in the place, how do you connect on any intimate level? And that's where I think people get stuck in the process.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, like we've said before, I mean, Dr. J said this before, there's a lot of media, that's like just too much shaming, shaming people that are, not doing it exactly how society wants it to be. And I'm finally starting to be myself. And I'm glad that you're holding this space because it's quite helpful. Like I don't relate 100% to it, but I can still get something out of it. Thank you.
Well, I'm so happy that you're able to get something out of it. I know that it is something that a lot of people seem to want to discuss with me privately, knowing that my background as a bereaved parent and being divorced and all of that, but that people are really afraid to open up, and societally we're afraid to talk about it. I mean, how many people lose spouses and children and important people in their life every year, and it's really difficult to find any information about sexuality during periods of grief. It's out there, but we're not made aware of it, and people don't really know how to look for it. And it's too bad because they're so linked. Which brings me to another question for Dr. J. Any for someone who is experiencing changes of any kind in their sexuality, whether it's increased in sex and sexuality, whether it's a change to their approach to sexuality, whether it's an increase in arousal or decrease, whether it's a change, like whether it's gender fluidity, whatever it is under the umbrella of sexuality, any kind of changes there. Are there resources for them that are easy to find so that they don't have to like go through that, oh my God, I need to talk to somebody about this, but I don't even know who to talk to about it, because many people that I know are afraid to even talk to their therapist about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's like having a Rolodex. Who are the people that I can go to? And I'm sure, Melissa, that a lot of people put you in that category. Here's the resource. And maybe that's what happens is you're creating what the sexuality list is. I'm one of those people that always goes back to science, and I go to who are the people that are providing information that's going to be helpful. I look at the American Association for Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists and their national organization. People have so many different specialties, and I always start at that point, or even SICUS, the Sex Information Council of the United States. These are two places that have their fingers in so many different directions that they'd be able to say, these are people that you can talk to about these specific topics. And sometimes as we know in doing therapy, it's easier to connect with a stranger than it is to connect with someone who's necessarily close by in our lives, because we have the anonymity in that process. And with that anonymity, we can step forward. I know sometimes people will ask me questions about why relationships end after the death of a child. And sometimes it's a breaking point in the way a relationship was put together to start with. And the stress of this is so huge. It's like a stick and it really just broke in two. Or someone wants to have that outside person to talk with. So perhaps they want to invite another person into the sexual arena of their world without sharing that with the spouse. I'm into consent all the way around. And this is probably the hardest time to really be saying, I want to do something different. So we get back to that communication. And I'm always get a facilitator, get someone who can help see each meanings back and forth between the people to help you make that movement forward. Maybe it's the people around you who say, these are folks that can help you. Here is the Rolodex. Here is ASECT. Here is SECUS that can provide some other information for you.
Wow, thank you so much for that. Can you do me a favor, either now or after the talk, if it's easier for you? Can you direct message me the links to those resources, or give them to Dr. A so she can put them up in the nest if you're able to do it while we're chatting here. That way I can disseminate it amongst my people.
Excellent. I'll get it to you one way or the other. I'm kind of precariously sitting at the moment. I'm not sure I can reach what I need to reach to do it.
It is absolutely fine. If it's after the space, that's fine. And I will tweet it out and send it to my newsletter people and my bereaved parent groups as well, because this is a topic that comes up a lot.
I was going to ask you, you were talking about the different things that you have learned in the process. I know and that there is research available, but how do people find it? I was looking up, the stressor pileup is a loss-oriented stressor. And I look at what are the messages that people have received about grieving or about sexuality, and where's an intersection about those two things for them. And that's the interpersonal factors. And then, the intrapersonal, how fluid are you as a person and your psychological flexibility? I think about Gumby. Are you movable? Are you straight as an arrow? And how are you going to take what is happening to you and the feelings and the emotion that you're dealing with? How does that fit all together? And then what's your basic coping style? So we know those things come into play for how your bereavement is going to be overall. But I'm always fascinated when I find research, and I don't know if you've seen this to be the case, that we do see a clear difference in gender for sexuality in grieving, and that men tend to come to wanting to have active sexuality in their life sooner than women do.
That is fascinating. I can't say it was my own experience, but that is that, and also maybe not surprising, because we know in our society that oftentimes the only touch that men get, that straight men mostly get, is through sexual intimacy. And so a lot of men have problems. There's tons of studies on this. I'll try to find them when we're off this chat. And I'm sure you already know all this, Dr. J. So this is for other folks. So oftentimes the touch that comes through sexual intimacy is the only time men are touched. Women tend to hug more. I would imagine gender fluid folks tend to hug more as well, although I don't know that for sure. I haven't seen any study on that. But it's often the only touch men get. And grief can be very isolating. And touch is so healing, and it releases oxytocin and all these other neurotransmitters that are really important toward coping. So it's not surprising to me that men seek it out sooner.
Well, the other thing too is that when we take a look at some of the research that I was checking out before we came in here was talking about that women suffer more from grief in different ways that intrude specifically on sexual activity, and sometimes they perceive sex as something that's wrong. And so we're looking at those societal messages, especially if the meaning of sex is procreation and you've lost a child. To move forward with an act of sexual intercourse is directly related to the child. And so I work with people to consider redefining sex and putting in those smaller directions where you are talking about the intimacy. Like, we know that there's that great skin to skin component that people can have. You know, you're talking about it as the touch direction. Suppose two people were just lying together and it's a heart to heart, so our bodies can wake back up to that, or eye to eye, because we know gazing is an important part, and then the actual skin to skin component. Maybe it's about saying, can we set time aside for 5 minutes of this and let our bodies recalibrate or reactivate to things that were familiar from the past, that were good and wholesome and were what the relationship is about. But we don't have anybody, again, helping us facilitate what those baby steps would be to get there.
No, we sure don't. And again, I think most people don't even know who to ask. And if they did know who to ask, might not feel comfortable asking, because we're not living in a society that really shows us the positive aspects of sexuality. It's, it's.
And now you know why I spent all my time going, we can normalize a conversation about sexuality, and I do it in the daylight. Here we are having the conversation.
Yeah, God bless you. I'm serious. You're my people, and I'm very grateful for you. But yes, it's. I mean, it's so important. It doesn't have to be taught. Well, it seems what our society has done is make it tawdry, make it naughty, and then make it bad to talk about, but just hammer people with images of it.
Yes.
But then make them feel bad about it. So it's not surprising that women might feel it's wrong. They're the one carrying the child, and so it's just a more loaded situation anyway. Women or trans, it's going to be more loaded for them anyway. You're the one that carried the child. You're often the one feeding them with your body. It's just a little more loaded to start with, and then there's just so much more shame about sexuality in general placed on, with just beat into your head from the time you're a little girl. So that's not terribly surprising to me. It's a shame, but it's not surprising.
Yeah, and when we go back to that basic question of what does sex mean to you, what emotion are you bringing forward? I'm craving the closeness. I'm craving the heart part of what we're doing. Well, maybe intercourse is not the way to get that particular thing met. And so we're working on what other things, how large is the repertoire that can be utilized for people to feel a connection with one another to start the process.
Beautiful. I love it. Does anyone have any questions for or comments for Dr. J or myself? Any questions, any comments?
Another thing too, Melissa, in terms for females, is taking a look too when we talk about the PEMS, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Sometimes hormones, depending upon the timing of when a death has occurred, say, for instance, someone was perimenopause, or just the changes of where their body is. Sometimes heavy, large emotions can wallop the system so that it changes how things are working. And so maybe you're going to be taking a look at a open-minded physician who's going to be helping you in that direction too, to see what's going on for your body physically to help you jumpstart the process. A lot of times people don't think about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, even when you're, in your peak reproductive years, there's hormonal changes through the month, and very few people realize that men also have hormonal changes. Theirs are more just throughout the day, rather than their peaks and valleys are more daily than over a month. But and grief can absolutely wallop male capability as well, and that's something we really don't want to talk about in this society, do we?
Right. I mean, and we understand that the body works in a particular way. There's a switch in the brain that says blood flow to the pelvis. We know what reactions happen with that blood flow causes an erection or it doesn't cause an erection. And for women, lubrication and, that whole process is changed based on emotion, based on thinking, based on the physical. And when you have large emotions like you feel when grieving, it affects every single one of those particular items. And that's, the hard part is communication about what's going on, because people may have an inkling about how their body is working specifically, but they've never really talked about it before. So now I really don't want to bring it up. And you're just looking at how to revamp or restructure or re-put together yourself and your relationship at the same time. And that is a tall order. So I'm saying people need support in this process to say, even though it's a tall order, there are mechanisms and there are things that you can do, but communication is going to be at the core of that.
Absolutely. Dr. A has a question, and also I have Steve on as a listener. And Steve, I sent you a speaker invite. If you had a question, you don't have to accept it if you would like to stay in listener mode. Go ahead, Dr. A.
Okay, I know this is child loss chat, but I wonder if all sorts of grief can affect sexuality, like a divorce, let's say, which is what I went through last year, losing a
Yeah.
28-year relationship.
Absolutely. I think when we talk about grief, grief is tied to loss. And loss can be, we can just list out the types of losses that one can have. They can be on a continuum, your own personal continuum. This loss, had this much amount of zap to me. This loss had this much amount of zap to me. And every time we lose something in our lives, we go through a process of grieving. And yes, it's going to affect our body. And that's another aspect related to communication and emotions. That I go back to the meaning of sex when we're not talking about the reason that we're moving forward with the connections that we want to have. When we don't do that, we don't get the information about what is working for us and what is not working for us in communication with another person.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Did that help, Dr. A?
Oh, absolutely. All these chats on grief help tremendously.
I'm so happy to hear that. We don't talk about it enough, and we don't talk. I call it the corollary deaths. For me, I had the death of my child, and it only takes about 5 minutes for you to realize all of the corollary deaths that involve. It's the change in your family structure. It's my oldest sibling is now an only sibling. I suddenly don't have to buy diapers anymore. I suddenly am a mom of an only child and not a larger family. It changes the nature of your relationship with your spouse, sometimes for the better, sometimes not. If you're a single parent to start with, then you're really navigating that all alone, which is just, I pray for all of the single parents that lose a child that they have a really amazing network around them, because it's a lot to navigate as a single parent. Excuse me.
So, Melissa, Melissa, you're also addressing the ritual of our lives. And anytime something leaves our life, that we want to honor it and we want to give it its space and grace that it's had for our lives. And that's part of what the grieving process has to do with. And I think sometimes for people, when you're dealing with the death of a child, that when they are looking at adult play, which is what I call sexuality and sex, it is adult play, people can feel that they're disrespecting the situation, wanting to have that sexual intimacy that's going to be pleasurable, that's going to give them goodness and quality of life, that they have to get past the script of what that has to do with. And we need to create those spaces where people can work that process too.
Amen. I mean, the guilt of having any kind of pleasure or enjoying even the way your meal tastes, or feeling happy or looking forward to a vacation, all of it, when you've lost a child, particularly, I think, you feel guilty about enjoying anything for a I think some people suffer from the guilt more than others. I had all my eggs in the guilt basket after Alice died. Mainly because we still, to this day, almost 9 years later, it will be 9 years in a couple weeks, we still don't know why she died. And there's another SUDC parent on this call, so that they also don't know why their kid died. When you don't know why your kid died, there's nowhere to direct the anger, right? If your kid, there's no good way to lose your child. They're all horrible, and they're different flavors of horrible. But right now I'm going to talk about the flavor of having no idea why your kid died. There's nowhere to direct the anger. You can't be mad at the government. You can't be mad, like, who are you mad at? So I found that most of the parents who lost their child like I did, it goes inward, and that's guilt. It can be shame also for some people. So it goes inward, it becomes guilt. And the guilt can really color. I mean, I felt guilty for everything. And I mean everything. And I knew that it couldn't last. I told my mother at the time, and I write about this in my upcoming book, I felt like I had little packets in my body, and I could feel them. I could even point to where they are. Like little packets of plutonium that were popping one by one. And that little pop wasn't going to kill me. And that little pop wasn't going to kill me. And that little pop. But eventually, all that plutonium popping open was going to take me down itself. It wasn't going to take suicide or a car accident or anything. It felt like the guilt alone could kill me because it was so overpowering and so visible to me. And so I knew, I guess the good thing about it being that huge is I knew that I had to get a handle on it ASAP, because I knew that I was not going to be able to really have anything resembling even a decent life if I didn't. But that guilt of enjoying anything after your child dies is real. I don't know a single bereaved parent that hasn't felt it at some point. And so it absolutely would come into play with sexuality. I mean, there's just almost no way.
There's a sexuality author, Emily Nagoski, who talks about Come As You Are, and her book is about female sexuality. And she's doing some new work where she's talking about grief, and she says that grief is a portal that opens the door to allow us to access pleasure. So it's like we need to disperse grief in order to have space for other things to come in. And we know that a lot of people feel like if I go into my grief, I'll be going into the cave, or I'm going to get trapped there. I'm going to be stuck forever. And if we can kind of think about grief as maybe tunnels to go through, and some people may have shorter or longer tunnels than other people, but there will be a light at the end in the way that you just said that, Melissa. And how can we help people to trust that their body will release you from the grief and that you will be able to get into the light. But when you begin to heal, that's when that space for pleasure is really going to be available and, allow you to get back to the pleasure of what sex has to do with in the ecstasy arena, that further continuum that we have.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful point. And I'm going to get that book and I might see if I can grab her for the show. But I luckily, being a dork, I knew about this that you're talking about now. And so I made a concerted effort in the beginning. I remember sitting at my child's, it was after the memorial service. I mean, the wake. They had taken her, we had the wake at our home, old school style. We did a green funeral, so she wasn't embalmed, and we were able to do it at our home, which was better for our younger daughter, and so she didn't have to be in some tacky 70s funeral home where she'd have to behave and stuff like that. So, but it was after that, and I just had this overwhelming feeling, if I don't laugh right now, I'm going to die. Like I might not die right now, but I'm going to die for sure if I don't laugh right now. And so I did not feel like laughing. Let's make that perfectly clear at all. It felt like medicine. Like I don't want to laugh, but if I don't, I'm going to die. And so, I watched some Ricky Gervais and some other comedians and, this woman from the South who's really mad that it was hot. That makes me laugh every time I see it. I just watched things that I knew for sure that would make me laugh. I did things for sure that I knew at least used to make me feel good. And I did them even if it didn't make me feel good yet. I knew I had to. And eventually it worked. And when a combination of doing that and also not fighting the grief, I noticed that the grief comes, you mentioned tunnels. For me, it felt like storms, like a summer storm, as we were talking about before. It came in like a storm. If I don't fight it, it comes and it goes. And it's like 5 minutes, 7 minutes. And so I just learned to keep marching toward the love. I kept saying, just keep marching toward the things that might make me feel good one day, used to make me feel good, might make me feel good now. I don't know, but I'm going to do it anyway. And keep marching toward the love and not fight those intense feelings of grief so that they pass through me like a storm. That was my method, and it works for me. I know Michelle has a question, and then Steve.
Hi, Melissa. Yeah, it's not a question. I just wanted to say again how inspiring you are, honestly. Seriously, you really are such a strong, kind, amazing human, and I'm just so happy that I've met you. I've known you for about 7 months now, and you really are incredible. Never forget that.
Oh, now you made me cry, Michelle. Thank you. I'm very glad that I met you. You are really, truly inspiring yourself, and what you've lived through is harrowing, and it shouldn't happen to anybody, but here you are making the world a better place anyway, and for that you are a hero, and I'm so glad that you're here and getting some benefit. Steve had a question. So Steve, you can just unmute your mic and go ahead.
Hello, everyone. My name's Steven. I am also a fellow parent, survivor of a parent my daughter passed away through SUDC. I want to bring up 2 interesting points. I really believe that first laughter was a key, what you said, Melissa. I remember it was the day after my daughter passed away, and one of my friends came over and he was giving me a haircut. That was his way. That was his medication. He does not cut hair at all. And the way he was acting, it allowed me to laugh. And at that moment, it was the first moment where I realized, okay, I'm laughing. I just smiled. So I'm going to experience this again. So I think that first laughter like you said, if you're watching Ricky Gervais or whatever, that was like a big moment for me. And then I wanted to bring up in regards to sexuality. I don't know if this was discussed, but what if there's one partner, either male or female, who is taking antidepressants and just doesn't want to be touched?
That is really hard, and I'm going to send that to Dr. J.
Well, we know that to start with, from a physical direction, when one takes antidepressants, it actually causes the interest in sex to go down to start with. So you add on top of that the grieving that's going on, you're going to have another double whammy kind of situation. And so I think that's where you're going to end up having conversations where how do we create baby steps to get to a place where maybe we can override what the actual physical body is doing. And it takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort. And it may be a longer process than one is prepared for. But you have to have faith and trust the process that you're going to come out on the other side if you're working together for that to be the case.
Right. I think there's a lot of couples are dealing with that.
I think you're absolutely right, Stephen. And like you used the example of your friend cutting your hair. So to me, that first of all, I'll do pretty much anything for anyone that touches my hair. You touch my hair, like gently for like 5 minutes, I'll build you a house. I mean, there's really nothing I wouldn't do for you. I'll run your business. I'll take your kids to school. There's very little I wouldn't do for someone that would just touch my hair for 5 minutes. And if they did it longer than that, I mean, I don't know what I would do for them. So finding, trying to identify what kind, a way that you can get any kind of touch in, any kind of intimacy at all. And the hair is pretty, non-sexual, but it is very relaxing. And it can really bring a person's guard down. And it can be sometimes enough of a taste if it's repeated, over time, and the person feels safe and not judged and all of those things. I mean, that seems like Dr. J keeps talking about baby steps. That seems like a good baby step. But there's a 1,000 other little baby steps. Maybe it's holding someone's hand. Maybe it's, giving someone a pat on the back when they're crying, or just holding their hand or whatever. I think finding those baby steps. What do you think, Dr. J?
Yeah, I was going to hop in because the other point that Stephen made is that, and you're hitting on it, Melissa, the more that we can figure out where we can address the skin thirst, where we can have those touches, it's going to be a neurological component, like priming the pump, like getting the process going again. And if as a writer, I'm always thinking about using all of the senses. So what would be a scent that historically was positive and upbeat? I don't know. I'm throwing this out. Bubble gum. I mean, who knows? I have a lemon candle beside me. It has no connection to anything except that I really like the way the room smells in that direction. So you're starting to think about application to awaken the senses. And those could even be, hand rubs, foot rubs, bath bubbles, any of the things that will allow you to have spaces where the body can react to what its normative direction of working is about.
And just try not to take it too far for the other partner. If you're doing just a foot rub, it's just a foot rub. If you pressure them into doing a little more than what they're comfortable with.
Yeah, that's where your basic communication comes in, where you're saying, I would like to have this, where you're actually being able to say, this would be wonderful if we could share this moment, and this is what I need in this moment, and this is the way that I would like to have that happen. And that's part of the drawing a circle around it so the people can just be in that space, breathe life into that space, allow their body to experience what's in that space, and then you'll be able to take that great energy into the next step.
That's a really great point. And with relation to skin thirst, I definitely had I had skin thirst actually before I was ever married, when I first moved to LA and I didn't know anyone. And I found myself really craving a massage. And maybe I had only had 2 massages in my entire life at that point. So it seemed an odd thing for me to crave. And I enjoyed the massages, don't get me wrong, but it was not something I had done, I hadn't done it enough to, miss it. So but I just was like consumed with the idea of getting a massage. And I realized eventually I don't know anyone here. And I'm from the Midwest. I lived in Chicago at the time, where my friends all hugged me when they saw me. No one had hugged me in months, not even like a short hug. And I like, that must be why I'm craving this massage. So I let myself go get a massage. And it made a big difference, that skin thirst started to quell. So, while we're talking about like taking baby steps to awaken someone's somatic feelings, one thing you could do to help them kind of awaken into their body, because often in grief and PTSD we dissociate. So, and you definitely are not going to be interested in sex. Well, I guess that could really go either way. But oftentimes, if one is dissociating, you're not really in your body. So doing something fun with it is not really even crossing your mind. But if you can send that person to a safe massage that's just a treat for them, that you're not involved with, and do it safely with no expectations afterwards, other than let's do this for you to help you get back in your body and enjoy being in your own skin again. I think that would be a beautiful gesture. What do you think, Dr. J?
I was going to say that's a spectacular example, and then I would add the piece at the end. The piece at the end would be the conversation. How was that for you? What did you tap into? So it gives the communication back to the giver who created the space for you to go have that lovely massage and start the process, because it needs to be the back and forth information. You're in this as a team. You want to stay together as a team. That the team effort needs to show up in this direction. So to give and to receive is an important component.
That is a very good point. Thank you, Dr. J. Michelle has another question. Then we're going to probably wrap it up here in a moment.
It's not a question, but I'm a hugger. I am a really touchy-feely person, as in like friendly. I like to hug. I like to express my care in that way. But, a lot of people have said to me, it's too huggy, or, I'm not that into hugging people and stuff. So I think it's a shame, because I've had one friend that said to me, oh no, I never got hugged, so I'm just not used to it at all growing up.
Yeah, that's hard when you have 2 people that have different levels of interest in touch in general, obviously, but I think there just has to be a lot of mutual respect, and that's why we have wide circles of friends and connections. And if it's a relationship where one person needs touch more than the other, then there are ways for the partner that doesn't need or want the touch as much to still be supportive of the partner that does.
I think for me, obviously I'm autistic, so I think sometimes I might, this is example like me walking about. I think sometimes I might give flirting signals by accident, and then if I do like a woman, like sometimes they think I'm just being platonic. I don't get it right, but because I've said, I'm just into women, for example, and I've got quite a few men friends, and I hug them, and they think I'm flirting. So it's not easy. It really isn't. Communication is key. But I do say, look, it's friendly, and then say, oh no, I don't think it is.
Yeah, I think, the bottom line is how clearly you know who you are and how you choose to bring that forward to the people that are important to you. And so, as I was thinking about tying this together, Melissa, I was thinking about, to use the holistic model, PEMS, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, to identify what you're feeling in your body in the moment. And that's the key aspect to me, is to help people stay in the moment with where they are so that they'll be able to make the next step and the next step and the next step. So you assess all of the PEMS, you determine what are all the feelings that you're having, and then related to sexuality, when you step into the circle of that's where I want to be, clarify the meaning that you're having.
We should put that on banners everywhere in the entire world. Thank you so much, Dr. J. This has really been a great talk, and I deeply appreciate your contributions to it. Do you have any parting thoughts before we sign out of here?
Well, for anyone who's heard our conversation today, I hope that they would take this as a teachable moment and be able to go out to their grassroots network and say, if you know someone who's grieving and they're working with these particular issues, use the conversation that was had here today to bring that forward. Be the voice to get it out there before it's asked of you.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful. And I am deeply grateful to you, Dr. J, for joining us on this space and talking about this topic that's so important and not discussed nearly enough. And a big thank you to Alexandria, who does my behind the scenes everything. I could not do the show without her. Thank you for your questions and comments, Michelle and Stephen. We appreciate you. And to all the other listeners out there, Child Loss Chat has been mostly on Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. We have an odd day and time today, and that might happen a few other times because we've got some crisis in my family right now, so I'm trying to do what I can do when I can do it. But I loved this chat today so much, and I'm so appreciative to all of you, and I look forward to next time. Thank you so much. Go out there and make meaningful connections. Bless you all. Thank you for joining us today. For more information on the show or my other work, you can check out thisclubsucks.com or melissamariemonroe.com, or you can find me on Twitter at @MMeaning. May you experience some gentleness on your path today.